about something called control flow in JavaScript. Control flow is using if, else if, and else statements in order to allow our programs to make choices. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to build out a very basic guess my number game. And then we're going to basically use some if, else if, and else statements in order to evaluate the numbers that are being given by our user in this game. So we're going to start by prompting the user for a number. And we're going to do this with var num is equal to prompt. And we're going to put in the string, what is your number? So when I run this, the prompt button will come up, prompt box will come up, and it will prompt the user as a number. And when I type the number into this prompt box, it will store that number in the variable num, so that when I log that number out, right, just like we did in previous lesson, it logs the number that the user puts into that prompt box. Okay, now I want to set a number. Let's call it computer num, and let's actually change this var num into user num, right? And we're going to set the computer number to the number 5, okay? And so now when the user is prompted for a number, we're going to want to check to see whether the user's number is equal to the number that the computer has selected. In this case, we've hard-coded it in as the number 5, but you can imagine that we could add a random number generator to this that would make the computer number into any number, say between 0 and 10 or 0 and 20, or whatever we would really want it to be. But let's keep it hard-coded as 5 right now in order to deal with this particular prompt a little bit more easily, and so you can see how the control flow works a little bit more easily. So what we do here is we use an if and an else statement. So the if statement takes parameters. The parameters are what we're checking. In this case, we want to know if the user num is equal to, remember that equivalent sign, right? The computer num. Now, to be safe, we should probably cast user num as a number. This isn't necessarily necessary, because even though the prompt will make user num into a string, if I'm comparing it with a number, it will auto cast it for me. But it's good practice to get used to doing those casts on your own. So if user num is equal to computer num, I want to console.log, you guessed my number. Okay? Now, inside of these curly brackets here is the code that's run if the parameter, if the condition that's inside the parentheses here is true. So if this condition evaluates to true, basically if the user num is equal to the computer num, that would evaluate to true like we talked about in the last lesson, then it will log you guessed my number. An else statement takes care of any other condition that's not taken care of by the if statements that come before it. So I can log console.log you missed it. Okay. Now if I run this and I put in the number 6, it logs you missed it. And if I run it and I put in the number 5, which is the same number that the computer num is, it'll log you guessed my number. Now I can make this even a little bit more interactive, a little more complex, by checking a couple of other conditions. So in this case, I can use an else if statement, and then I can put another condition here inside these parentheses. And so in this case, I would like to log whether the user put in something that was too low. So if the number user num is less than, add parenthesis here, computer num. I want to log too low with a frowny face. And then if it's greater, I'll log, let's change you missed it to too high. Okay? So if I run this, basically what's happening here is I'm checking for equality. Then I'm checking to see if the number is less than the computer's number. And then if it's not less than the computer's number, it must be greater than the computer's number, and so too high will work. And so in this case, I've got an unexpected token here. What does that mean? It means that I have an extra parenthesis here in line 6. Okay, now I'll run it. All right, what is my number? My number is 5. You guessed the number. What is my number? I'm going to say the number 3. I'm going to test out all the possibilities. It's too low. What is my number? I'm going to test the number 9. It's too high. So it works as I intend for it to work. But check this out. What if I put something weird in there? What if instead of a number I put hello, I put a string or something like that? It's going to say too high. And that's because it checks an equality condition and it checks a less than condition, but it doesn't check anything else. This else statement here catches anything that's not equal or less than the computer's number. So it makes more sense for me to create another else if statement, and we're going to do number user num is greater than computer num, okay? And then have an else statement that's going to handle any other condition. So if the user doesn't put in a number that I can evaluate against my computer number, then I want to be able to handle that. So I'm going to log in to my user. Please enter a number next time. So if I run this, what is my number? If it's a 9, it's too high. If it's a 1, it's too low. If it's a 5, I guess the number. And if it's a string, like hello, please enter a number next time. And so this handles all of the different cases that I intend for it to handle. And so just to recap, your parameters for the if statement go inside the parentheses, and this is the condition that you're checking. In this case, is the user's number equal to the computer number? And then the code that you run after you've checked this go into the curly brackets. The rest of the code in here will not be run. So if the if code is run, it'll skip the else if code and the else code. And it'll basically just fall through from if to else if to else if to else. And then if one of these things is actually true, it runs the code that's inside of the curly brackets and then jumps down here. So if I were to log something down here like this is the end of the game, you can see that it logs it after it logs the result from my if statement. So the if statements are ways for us to handle making choices in code. You're going to be using these a lot. So play around with these and get used to them and complete the exercises that I have given to you.